In the darkest hours of the night, every step taken in the hospital corridors whispers a story filled with whispers. Or at least, that's what I thought, until those nights came. Have you ever wondered, are the places we go to heal actually becoming homes for the souls that have left our bodies? Or is there another reality we choose to ignore, one we refuse to acknowledge? Tonight, we will confront 3 true hospital stories where the walls whisper, the elevators lock, and the dead die twice. Each story will take you along that fine line that science cannot explain and logic cannot grasp. You will think twice before falling asleep. Are you ready? Because tonight, you will be deprived of sleep. Let's begin. Story 1. The Man in Room 6B. In the quiet rooms of hospitals, I have always believed that although the body may have left, the spirit remains. Not because of what we see, but because of what we try to ignore. It was my 5th year working the night shift at Fairview General, a mid-sized hospital nestled in the misty hills of Oregon. The graveyard shift had long since become routine. High caffeine coffees, reporting, prolonged silences, and occasional emergency calls. But that changed the night Harold Griggs was admitted to room 6B. Harold was 83 years old. He had a pale, leaf-thin skin and eyes that were cloudy and sunken like marbles. His inability to sleep had caused him to look that way. He had come in with pneumonia and early signs of sepsis. He had no one to care for him. No visitors. He was in such a difficult condition that he couldn't take care of himself, and he had a hard time speaking. But what affected me the most was that he seemed to be awake all the time. As if something was there watching him, he lay there with his eyes fixed on the corner of the room. On the second night of his hospitalization, when his vital signs spiked, I was on duty at the East Wing nursing station. Then they flattened out for 5 seconds. Just 5 seconds. Then they returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Just silence. I rushed inside. Harold was sitting upright in bed, breathing normally, but his eyes were still fixed on that corner. "Did you see him?" he asked before I could speak. At that moment, I felt a cold sweat break out. Who? The man in the coat, the one in the long black coat. He comes every night. I looked where he was looking. There was nothing but the dark beige corner of the room. I told myself it was just delirium. When the old mind begins to decay, the sense of reality disappears. The next night, another patient across the hallway called me in a panic. "There's someone in that room," he whispered. He was just standing there, watching. I asked him to describe him. He was wearing a long black coat. That night at 2:23 a.m., the hallway lights flickered. The security cameras malfunctioned for exactly 23 seconds. I stood outside room 6B, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out of my chest, feeling the air rush into my lungs. Inside, Harold lay frozen, his eyes wide, his mouth moving in a silent prayer. On the 4th night, he screamed. I rushed inside and found him curled up in the far corner of his bed, muttering over and over, "Don't let him in, don't let him in, don't let him in." He died that night at 2:13 a.m., flatline. The autopsy said heart failure, but when we found him, his fingernails were bloody. He had clawed so hard at the sheets that they were torn. The following week, they moved another patient to 6B. The same patient, like Harold, was frozen in place, staring at the dark beige corner, watching without sleeping. "Don't leave me alone. Don't leave me alone. Don't leave me alone." I heard those moans for 2 days. He died 2 nights later, at the same time, just 2 days later, and with the same expression on his face. The janitors don't clean the room unless there's daylight. Security skips their rounds. Even the manager stopped assigning tasks unless there was no one else available. But I know the truth. Every night at 2:23 a.m., the corridor monitor outside room 6B flickers on and off for 23 seconds. This time frame never changes. And during those 23 seconds, if you listen carefully, you can hear footsteps approaching the door. Slow, deliberate footsteps. You would witness something scraping against the dark beige walls. They say hospitals are places of healing, but I've learned that some rooms aren't meant for the living. Some have already been claimed. Have you ever seen someone standing in the dark in a place where no one should be? Story 2. Blue Code in Bodrum. I was 23 years old when I started my emergency medicine rotation at Crestfall Regional Hospital. Since I was new, I was referred to as a rookie. However, the story I experienced was quite extraordinary for a rookie. A new badge, a tense face, hands barely holding together behind a forced smile. They say the first few weeks are about learning. Mine was about surviving, mentally. Everyone had warned me about the basement on the hospital's second floor. They called it the cold vessel. They said it was a place where time stood still and radios died. No clock moved forward. No frequency could be picked up there. I thought they were teasing me, a rookie. I wish they had been. It was Friday night, the night shift. The emergency room was packed, as it always was on Friday nights. Some were there because their best friend was coughing constantly, others because their stomach had been churning all night. But that day, more serious cases kept coming in one after another. There were 3 trauma cases, a cardiac arrest in room 14, and a man screaming about demons on the ceiling in the hallway. Then the charge nurse looked at me and said, "You're on transport duty. Take this sealed biohazard bag to the morgue." As a rookie, I had to do these things, but I had imagined myself running around with a defibrillator in my hand, sweat on my forehead. I tried not to show my disappointment. I was expecting action, not a basement run. The bag they gave me was extremely heavy and hot. But why was it hot? I felt uneasy. It scared me. I didn't ask what was inside. Probably blood samples, I told myself. I pushed it into the elevator and pressed B2. The doors closed with a groan. As we began to descend, the lights flickered. At first, I thought it was a classic movie scene, but I couldn't stop myself. My stomach tightened. The elevator shook, then stopped, between floors. Darkness swallowed everything. I was still wondering how everything could be progressing so classically. But my thoughts didn't stop what was happening. I couldn't make sense of what was happening. I was frozen, holding on to the car. My phone wasn't working. No emergency call light. Just silence. Except for my breathing. It wasn't mine. It was slow, wet, like lungs filled with fluid. I turned slowly, the phone's light flickering. Trembling shadows fell on the metal elevator wall, but I could only feel it. There was nothing. The elevator suddenly came to life with a groan and descended with a heavy jolt. When the doors opened, the basement was pitch black. Only the emergency flashlight in the distant corridor flickered red every 3 seconds, like a warning heartbeat. The morgue door was barely open. I stepped outside. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have. As I walked toward the morgue door, I think I was experiencing the longest moments of my life. I couldn't take my eyes off the emergency flashlight. Then I saw it. Out in the open, a body table covered with a white sheet, but the sheet was shifting, small movements, like breathing, as if something beneath it were slowly turning in its sleep. My feet wanted to retreat. A voice inside me was telling me to get out of there. My body was showing me all its natural reflexes one after another. I wanted to run away. I really did. But something stronger was holding me there. Curiosity or fear, I don't know. Maybe it was necessity. I approached, with heavy steps filled with fear and curiosity. The sheet lifted as if pulled from within, as if someone were sitting beneath it. And then the corpse sat up straight, gray-skinned. Its mouth was open. Blood dripped from its nose, drop by drop. Its eyes rolled back. But then it turned to look at me. Everything was happening so quickly, yet so slowly that I realized I had to give up my curiosity. They told me I had screamed after the incident. I didn't remember any of it. Everyone on the emergency floor had actually heard me. But unfortunately, I was alone there. Security found me unconscious in the corridor, 20 steps from the elevator, in the morgue with white doors, with blood under my nails and a torn pant leg. What had I clawed at? Or what had clawed at me? The next morning, everyone was looking at me as if I had gone mad. I couldn't tear myself away from their fearful eyes or distance myself from them. My first task was to check the case records. I needed to find out what had happened there. I had to prove to everyone that I hadn't gone mad. A male patient in his early 40s had arrived at the emergency room at 2:43 a.m., just as I was in the elevator. Cause of death: internal bleeding due to an aortic rupture. The body was to be taken to the morgue. I was also going to the morgue, but the time of death in the morgue records: 2:49, 6 minutes later. Those 6 minutes when everything happened. After everything that happened that day, I told a few friends about it, but no one understood or listened to me. I was a rookie, a crazy rookie. I still imagine his face, bloodless, screaming without a sound. Sometimes when I get into empty elevators, I hear breathing behind me. I stopped going down to the basement, but no one asks why. They will know, because some truths live in silence. What about you? What would you do if someone died twice right before your eyes? Story 3, The Whispering IV Room. My name is Lauren, and if you can hear this, it means I've finally found someone who believes me. I worked the night shift as a psychiatric nurse at Ashgrove Mental Health Center, a place most people in town only whispered about or didn't mention at all. The hospital wasn't old or gothic. It was clean, well-lit, well-maintained, even sterile. But at night, there was a weight to the silence. No matter what, there was a chilling coldness inside, especially in the C-Wing, the oldest part of the facility. That's where it all began. That's where it all started and ended. The C-Wing was technically under renovation. Most of the rooms had been emptied or closed off. The only usable area was Serum Room 3, a small cramped corner set aside for patients receiving sedatives. They only sent me there when there were too many cases or when they really needed me. But even then, most of us avoided it. No one wanted to spend even a moment there. There were rumors about that room, unspoken rules we followed. Never stand in the corner, never leave a patient alone for more than an hour. If you're alone, never speak in the room. I always wondered why these rules existed. I wanted to ask, but they never gave me the chance. I understood the reason on the day I witnessed it. I thought these were just superstitions of the staff who'd been working here for a long time. If you work around trauma long enough, you create ghosts out of grief. I was wrong. It started with case 117-B. She arrived around 11:13 p.m. on Wednesday night. No ID, no history, nothing in the system. We searched the computer for a long time but couldn't find anything. A woman in her early 30s, found barefoot on an interstate highway and brought in by the state patrol. There was dried blood from someone else on her clothes. She hadn't said a word. They had brought her to the hospital as if she had a gag in her mouth. Dr. Mathis immediately ordered that she be given a sedative. No questions allowed. Give her Serum 3 and don't ask any questions, he said. His voice cracked as he spoke. I had never seen him so tense and irritable before. On the first night, I administered the serum and recorded his vital signs. He did not resist or react. He did not move. He lay motionless on the stretcher, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. But when I turned to leave, I heard a soft voice like a breath. "Don't leave me here." My steps seemed to freeze midway. I froze. I turned slowly. He hadn't moved. His mouth hadn't even opened. The next night, the same thing happened again. For a moment, I thought I was going mad. Next time, I should bring someone with me. I had to figure out if this was my mind playing tricks on me or if it was real. The next day, as I mentioned, I brought a janitor with me, James. A big man, a former soldier. He didn't believe in ghosts. He had served in Afghanistan and was known as the bravest soldier in the army. I got an unexpected reaction from him. The moment we stepped into 4-3, he stopped. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. It was like wind passing through narrow pipes, but it carried sounds, layered, overlapping whispers of words I couldn't understand. It was as if the air itself were speaking. It was a cold moment, cold enough to feel the vibration of the sound on our eardrums as it traveled from the back of our necks to our ears. James left without saying a word. The next day, he took sick leave. He never returned. The man who had been caught in the middle of the conflict and whom we thought no power could intimidate was gone. This was now a bigger shock for me. The fear and tension building inside me made every hair on my body stand on end. I reported everything. The sounds, the movements, the cold. But I did nothing but raise my eyebrows. Ashgrove doesn't like reports. He likes routine. On the 5th night, I found him standing in the corner. He wasn't looking at the room. His face was turned toward the wall. The serum had been removed. Blood was spreading across the tiles like a snail's trail, but he was silent. He wasn't moving. He wasn't moving at all. And then I heard the whispers again. This time, not from behind me. From his mouth, but his lips were tightly sealed. What I saw was real. I screamed. Without knowing what I was doing, I ran into the hallway and called for help. When security arrived, he had returned to his bed. The 4 was reconnected. There was no blood. There was no trace of the severed vein. I asked them to review the camera footage. They immediately reviewed the camera footage. I entered at 2:08 a.m., but the footage froze at 2:16. 8 minutes, gone. I couldn't believe my eyes. Those 8 minutes I had lived through moment by moment seemed as if they had never existed. All my evidence was on that recording. I tried to explain myself, showing the security guard my trembling hands to prove what had happened. The next night, I brought a recording device. I had no choice but to record it myself. I placed it under the bed at the far end. I didn't hear anything live, but when I listened to it during lunch, screams, dozens of them. Some distorted, some childlike. Some sounded like a radio frequency. At exactly 2:13, the recording cut off with a whispering voice. "Stay." They transferred him on the 7th day. No paperwork, no ambulance. He was just gone. His file disappeared from the system. 117B no longer exists. But 4-3, it's still there. They sealed the door with caution tape. Entry was now strictly prohibited to everyone, not for security, for silence. The entire room was sealed off, containing wall scratches, scattered sheets, and silent screams. A month later, I was assigned to pediatrics. I definitely agree that it was a better decision for me. Sometimes, when I pass through the south corridor, I swear I hear whispers coming from behind the wall. They say no one should be in that room, but they can't explain it. But I think that room should never have been empty. That's the only way we could have learned what happened, by facing our fears. If you were alone in a room and heard your name being whispered, Would you respond? Would you confront your fear, or would you turn your back and leave like Soldier James, never to return?